My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 70 years old, and 3 months ago my marriage officially ended. I need you to hear what I'm about to say because it might save you years of your life. Not because my story is dramatic or shocking, not because it involves betrayal, abuse, or some terrible secret, but because it's ordinary, and ordinary stories are the ones most people ignore until it's too late. My divorce became final on a quiet Tuesday morning in March. No courtroom tension, no shouting, no tears in front of strangers. Just signatures, a few polite words, and the end of a 46-year marriage. My ex-husband's name is Richard Whitman. We met when we were 23, both students at a small university in Ohio. He was dependable, calm, the kind of man parents approve of immediately. For most of my life, I believed that kind of man was exactly what love was supposed to look like. On paper, my life checked every box. A long marriage, 2 children we raised together, a modest house we paid off years ago, family holidays that followed the same familiar rhythm. Friends who said things like, "You two are solid," or "You're lucky to have something that lasts." And they were right. We lasted. What they didn't see was how little of us was left inside that longevity. There was no affair, no cruelty, no screaming matches or slammed doors. Richard never raised his voice at me. He never cheated. He never disappeared emotionally in obvious ways. He worked hard, showed up to family events, and took care of responsibilities. He did everything a good husband is supposed to do. And over time, we slowly stopped being partners. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It happened in small, almost invisible moments, conversations that stayed polite but shallow, touches that became functional instead of affectionate. Nights where we sat in the same room, each focused on something else, barely speaking. I told myself this was normal, that marriage settles, that passion fades, that companionship is what remains. That's what everyone tells you. By the time I was in my 50s, something felt deeply wrong, even though nothing looked wrong. We coordinated schedules, we discussed bills, we talked about our children. But we never talked about ourselves. We didn't ask each other how we felt, not because we were hiding something, but because we had quietly stopped being curious about each other. When our children moved out, the house felt different, too quiet, too still. There were no school schedules to manage, no distractions to fill the space. Just 2 people sitting across from each other at the dinner table, realizing they had very little to say. One evening stands out in my memory more than any argument ever did. Richard was reading the newspaper. I was washing dishes. I caught his reflection in the kitchen window and felt an overwhelming wave of sadness. Not anger, not resentment, just grief. Grief for the version of us that had existed decades earlier, and the realization that it wasn't coming back. I didn't say anything. I dried my hands and went to bed. For years, I told myself it was too late to change anything. We had invested too much time, built too much history. Leaving felt selfish, dramatic, unnecessary. I told myself I should be grateful. People would envy my life, I thought. People had it worse. But gratitude without connection slowly becomes suffocating. My body knew the truth long before my mind was willing to accept it. I started having frequent headaches, trouble sleeping, a constant tightness in my chest. Doctors ran tests. Everything came back normal. They said it was probably stress. I didn't feel stressed. I felt hollow. It wasn't until I turned 68 that something inside me finally shifted. I remember the moment clearly. I was sitting alone in the living room one quiet afternoon, sunlight coming through the curtains in long, soft lines. The house was silent, no television, no conversation, just me and my thoughts. And suddenly a terrifying realization settled in. If nothing changes, this is how I will live until I die. Not deeply unhappy, not in constant pain, just existing. comfortable enough to stay, but not fulfilled enough to feel alive. That realization felt heavier than any argument Richard and I had ever had. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with anger or tears. It came with clarity, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. That thought stayed with me for weeks. It followed me through grocery store aisles, through sleepless nights, through ordinary conversations. I tried to push it away, to tell myself I was overthinking, that this was just what long marriages look like. But the truth kept returning, quieter and firmer each time. Eventually, I suggested couples therapy. Richard agreed without hesitation, the way he always did, calm, reasonable, detached. There was no resistance, no argument, just acceptance. In many ways, that response summed up our marriage perfectly. We went to therapy for nearly a year. We learned how to communicate more clearly, how to listen without interrupting, how to be respectful, patient, and kind with each other. We did the work. We showed up, and for a while, I believed that effort alone might be enough. But as the months passed, something became impossible to ignore. We weren't uncovering buried love. We weren't reconnecting emotionally. We were simply learning how to coexist more peacefully. The silence became gentler, but it was still silence. And in the process, I learned something painful, but freeing. We weren't broken. We weren't failing. We were finished. We weren't broken. We were finished. There was no hidden resentment waiting to be resolved, no spark buried under years of misunderstanding. The love we once had transformed into something gentle and distant, familiar but empty, like holding onto an old photograph instead of living a present life. When I finally told Richard I wanted a divorce, my hands were shaking. I expected anger, I expected disbelief, I expected heartbreak. What I didn't expect was relief from both of us. He didn't argue, he didn't beg. He sat quietly for a long time and then said, "I think I've felt this coming for years." That sentence broke my heart and healed it at the same time. Ending a marriage at 70 is not something people prepare you for. Friends were confused. Some were quietly judgmental. Others asked questions like, "Why now?" or "At your age," as if happiness has a deadline. But here is the hard truth I learned. Time invested is not a reason to keep going. Longevity is not the same as love, and comfort is not the same as connection. The first months after separating were strange. I moved into a small apartment closer to the city. I woke up disoriented some mornings, forgetting where I was. Everything felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I could finally breathe. Heavier because I was facing the unknown alone. I missed the familiarity, but I did not miss the loneliness. There were evenings when I sat by myself, eating dinner in silence, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. But then I remembered how it felt to lie next to someone for years and feel completely alone. That kind of loneliness is far worse. Slowly, I started doing small things just for myself, things I had not done in decades. I joined a local walking group. I started reading novels again, not books about responsibility or productivity. I spent time in coffee shops, watching people come and go. I realized I still had curiosity, still had preferences, still had a sense of self. I was not starting over. I was finally starting, honestly. Richard and I remain on good terms. We check in occasionally. There is no bitterness, just acceptance. He is finding his own rhythm now, and I am finding mine. Our children were worried at first, but they see the difference. They see me calmer, more present, more alive. And that matters more than appearances ever did. Here is what I need you to understand. Leaving a marriage does not require a catastrophe. It does not require betrayal or abuse or some dramatic breaking point. Sometimes it is the right decision simply because you want to feel truly connected. If you are in a relationship that feels empty, even if nothing is technically wrong, listen to that feeling. Do not wait for permission. Do not wait for the moment where staying becomes unbearable. Your unhappiness does not need to be justified by disaster. I spent years believing I needed a better reason to leave. I thought wanting more made me ungrateful. It does not. It makes you human. I do not regret my marriage. It gave me children, stability, and many good years. But I do regret how long I ignored my own quiet truth. You are allowed to choose yourself at any age. You are allowed to want intimacy, affection, and real partnership, even when the world tells you that you should be satisfied. I am 70 years old. I do not know exactly what the rest of my life will look like. That used to terrify me. Now it excites me, because for the first time in decades, the future feels open. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. More stories like this are coming, and if you have lived through something similar, or you are standing at the edge of a hard decision, leave a comment. These conversations matter. Your story matters.